So I'm gonna take you through how to make some homemade sauerkraut. After you chop the cabbage by hand or using a food processor, you're going to take a nice big bowl. Everything needs to be very clean to make sure there's no contamination in the batch, bacteria that could grow while it's fermenting. So once everything's very clean, you take that nice big bowl, you put a large chopped head of cabbage in the bowl. Then you're going to take, you can experiment with how much salt between, I recommend about a level tablespoon to a heaping tablespoon. Really important to use a good quality salt like Dead Sea salt or French gray salt. So you're going to sprinkle that on the cabbage, and you're going to just begin massaging the salt into the cabbage. And now there's two ways to do this. You can either massage for about 10 minutes until all of the juices are coming out and all the pieces are getting nice and soft. Okay, the other option, which I'm gonna do instead, is you just massage it for a minute or two just to make sure that the salt gets in, evenly distributed and rubbed in everywhere. Okay, then you're gonna just put that aside for about 10 minutes, maybe 15. A little longer is better, and it's just gonna work on its own. The juices are gonna start coming out on its own. Okay, and then after 10 minutes or 15, you take the cabbage that's been already nicely juiced on its own, and you get your jar. You're gonna start packing it in the jar. Now, I usually like to use a jar with a rubber top like this, but depending on what I have or different sizes, a jar that has, I guess this is for making jelly. These are also work pretty good with this type of a lid, okay? But smaller jars that you're just recycling from your home also work good. The top is a little tricky if the jar is not as good to seal it, to get a good seal, but I will show you that part, and hopefully you'll be able to work that out, whichever type of jar you choose. So you're going to take your jar, whichever one you choose, and simply this one's been sitting now for a little while, so it's nice and juicy, and I'm just going to start to pack in the cabbage. I'm squeezing down. I'm really putting a lot of weight into it. Squeezing down, and I'm going to see that the juices as I squeeze down are continuing to come out of the cabbage, and that's great. We want as much juice in here as possible. So I just keep squeezing. Okay, the advantage with the jar with the rubber stopper and clamp is that the mouth is a little bit wider, so it's a little bit easier. If you have a bigger hand, you'll have trouble getting your hand into a smaller jar. However, with the wider lid, as I mentioned, it's a little harder to seal it off up top. However, with the rubber stopper and clamp, you have the advantage of both having a wider opening for your hand and also not having the problem of sealing it off at the end. So you're just going to keep packing it until you get to about an inch to and a half an inch of space at the top of the jar. So let's move along to that stage. I'll finish this later. Okay, so once you've packed it so that you've got about an inch to and half an inch of cabbage from the top, nice and juicy. There's a lot of juice. If I really would push this down with my fist, the juice would start to overflow. Okay, then you're going to take some of the leaves, the outer leaves of the cabbage that you took off when you were first chopping it in the food processor or by hand, and you basically just want to fill the rest of the space up top with this leaf or leaves or pieces of leaves. It doesn't have to be exact, but your main goals here is A, to fill the space that's remaining at the top, but also to keep these little pieces pushed down below the juice so that they don't float up. If they do float up, and at the end when you're taking your sauerkraut and harvesting it and it's ready to eat, if there's any little pieces that have floated up, if they've browned it all a little at the top, then you just skim off that top part and you can still use the rest of the jar. So I've really pushed it in. I'm going to take a little bit more just to fill up a little bit more of the air space. Okay, now I'm going to close it. Now most of the air space is filled. Sometimes the juice will just start to overflow a tiny bit when you really close it down, and that's okay as well. Just you don't want to lose too much of the juice, then you clamp it down. And it's basically the same as if you were using a small jar like this, but you really need to be even more careful with a regular jar and a regular lid, that you really fill the airspace as much as possible, and you really make sure that as much of the pieces of cabbage are pushed down below the liquid. So now I'm going to just let this sit out for anywhere between 3 days and 7-8 days. This is going to vary depending on the size of the cabbage pieces. In a food processor, they're nice and small. So 3 days in the summer, which we're in right now, is usually enough. But if it's bigger pieces, if the temperature in your home is a little cooler, then you're going to leave it 4 days, 5 days. I make a few at once, and I will harvest 1 or 2 of the jars a little bit early and put it in the fridge. Okay, once the sauerkraut is ready, it will last for at least a few weeks in your refrigerator. And so little by little, it's slowly fermenting in the refrigerator. So the idea with the ones that I've harvested early is that in a few weeks, they'll also be completely matured and ready to eat. And then you're just going to want to have a little bit with each meal. Start it gradually increasing from starting with a teaspoon or tablespoon. You can go up to about a half a cup. It will really help you to digest your meal, give you a lot of B vitamins, probiotics, great for the immune system, and many more benefits, which we can talk about in the future. So that's it for now. Have a great day.